Well, hello and welcome back to another installment of Mr. Eric Reads. Tonight, or today, whenever you watch this video, we will hear Walt Disney's American classic, Bum-ba-da-bum, Johnny Appleseed. Now, if you've never heard about Mr. Johnny Appleseed, I want you to sit back, relax, and just take a gander here. I think you're going to enjoy this. Here on Mr. Eric Reads. A long time ago in New England, there lived a boy named Johnny Chapman. Everybody loved Johnny, including the animals of the forest. He led a very simple life. He read the good book every day and carefully tended his apple orchards because, according to Johnny, apples are the finest thing on the earth. And I know what you're thinking, Mr. Eric, he's from New England, not from the South, but I've already started the voice, so. From the time he could walk, he planted apple seeds, and as the seeds grew into trees, so Johnny grew into a fine young man. Nothing bothered him as long as he had the sun and the rain, the good book, and his apple trees. Johnny loved all the living things, so whenever he walked, little birds flew about his head, and woodland creatures frolicked by his side. The wildest of beasts trusted Johnny, and they would sometimes lie down at his feet just to have their heads scratched. Why, Johnny even loved wolves. Often one would run right up to him. Then, instead of pouncing, that fierce wolf would act just like a puppy. One day, a wagon train rumbled past Johnny's place. "Howdy, young man," shouted the driver. "Come on out west and be a pioneer with us." Johnny wanted to go, but he wondered if it would be wise because he was so comfortable here in the east among his apple trees. Then from behind him, a loud voice hollered, "Johnny!" He turned around, and there stood the most pioneer-looking man he had ever seen. "You ought to go out west, Johnny," said the tall figure. "Shucks, I'm your guardian angel, so I ought to know. I'm here to say that all those folks will be needing apples when they settle out west, and what's more, I know you're a real expert out there at planting them old apple trees." Well, the words of his guardian angel made sense to Johnny, so the very next morning, he was ready to go. He slung a sack full of seeds over his shoulder, plopped an old cooking pot on his head for a hat, and with a seed planting stick in one hand and the good book in the other, Johnny headed out west. Week after week, mile after mile, Johnny traveled west, planting apple seeds over the hills and on the flat plains. As he went, Johnny was always looking out for folks less fortunate than himself. Like one time, he even gave his shoes to a man who had none. From that day on, rain or shine, Johnny roamed the countryside completely barefoot. You'd think that a man without shoes would be mighty fearful of snakes, but they sensed that he loved all the creatures and were grateful when he helped them make their homes in a cool, damp spot underneath the trees. Often, after hard days of planting, one of the settler families would invite Johnny into their cabin for dinner. When everybody was through eating, he'd ask, "Would you like me to read a little?" And the host would always nod yes. When it got too dark to see, Johnny would tell them of the plantlings that he'd left behind, and in return for their kindness, he'd leave some seeds for them to sow. Johnny often joined friendly Indians in their teepees for supper or even a little chat. As you might guess, he also helped them plant apple trees. Captain approves, apparently. One day, one of Johnny's Indian friends said to him, "Be careful. My tribe is going on the warpath tomorrow. So Johnny ran all day and all night to warn the settlers. Sure enough, the very next morning, the Indians did attack. No one was hurt, though, because Johnny's warning had sent the settlers to an army fort. Shortly thereafter, a peace treaty was signed and all the fighting stopped. And in peace, the Indians and the settlers planted apple seeds together. Year after year, the seeds that Johnny planted grew into sturdy trees. When the apples were red and ripe, folks came to help with the rich harvest. There were apple pies, apple dumplings, apple fritters, and apple cider. All the while, an old-time band played merrily, and everybody joined in. As the years passed, wherever Johnny went, apple trees and good neighborliness sprang up in his footsteps. For Johnny was planting more than apple trees. He was planting his own boundless faith and courage. He gave the settlers a new heart and strength to build this great land. And so it went for 40 years as Johnny Appleseed wandered across the West, looking for places to plant apple trees. No one knows how many trees he actually planted, but they say he popped those seeds in the ground so fast that it somehow looked easy. Settlers who came later heard tales of a kind man with a beard who had passed by some time before and planted all those beautiful apple trees that awaited them. Leaning up against one of his trees, Johnny stood off to one side and watched the folks enjoying themselves. He was pleased that the fruit from the orchards had brought them so close together. He reached up, picked an apple off the tree, and took a bite. Then, with a satisfied smile, he and his animal friends moseyed on westward. Johnny planted so many seeds on his way to the west that there were apple trees everywhere the settlers looked. At sunrise and sundown, folks would say, "You see that pink color in the sky? Wow, that's some of Johnny's apple blossoms glowing in the sunlight." And after a while, they just started to call that plain sky an apple blossom sky. Johnny wasn't looking for thanks. He figured that if folks saw how the apple trees grew from tiny seeds, it would give them hope and strength to carry on with what they were doing. And that was thanks to plenty. Johnny didn't even stop to notice that he was getting old and that his beard was growing as fast as the apple trees. As time went by, Johnny's beard sprouted full. The older he got, the longer it got, and the longer it got, the whiter it got. The whiter it got, the harder it was to tell which was the apple blossoms and which was Johnny. One night, out in the far west, while Johnny was peacefully sleeping under the apple tree, his guardian angel appeared and called to him. "Wake up, Johnny. We got a mighty long journey to take tonight." "Now hold on," said Johnny. "I've got a lot of trees to plant." Well, that's when the angel said, "That's fine, Johnny. Come home with me. We need a whole lot more trees, especially apple trees up there." Johnny's face lit up with a big smile, and the angel and he left the world behind. Even now in the country or in the city, people look up at the apple blossom sky and they smile because they think of old Johnny Appleseed. The end. Walt Disney's American classic Johnny Appleseed here on Mr. Eric Reads. You've got one more day of school. Enjoy it. We're going to make it through this weird rest of the school year, and then hopefully by the time we get back to school in August, everything is back to relative normalcy. Miss you guys. Take care of yourselves. Wash your hands and be kind.